Good evening, everyone. I'm Earl Butch Graves, Jr., CEO of Black Enterprise, and I want to welcome you to tonight's vital town hall discussion on the future of work. The dominant theme of this session is the rapid pace of change, reshaping the employment landscape across all fields. And I need not share with you the painfully obvious that for Black Americans, the stakes are exceptionally high. For us, the future of work and employment coincides with the future of Black economic and social advancement. It also shapes the development of Black entrepreneurship, as well as the stability of our communities and families. The scope and complexity of this transformation has heightened our collective concern. For example, the rise of automation and AI technology has revolutionized every industry. Whole categories of employees are at risk and being displaced. At the same time, new jobs are being created, jobs that require new skills and areas of expertise that didn't exist a decade ago. How do we, as a community, acquire the skills and master the expertise to compete and thrive in this emerging work environment? Moreover, there's the ongoing movement towards more remote and flexible work. There's no denying the fact that the pandemic altered work in fundamental ways. Yes, there's been a return to the physical workplace in part, but there's no going back to the way things were. The hybrid model is here to stay, but we've yet to fully overcome its challenges to productivity, efficiency, and collaboration. On a related front, the rise in the gig economy means fewer benefits and protections for a growing population of workers and brings into question whether remote or gig work truly move us forward as a nation. Of course, there is the critical matter of diversity, equity, and inclusion in the nation's workspaces. The dramatic tech and pandemic-driven makeover of the employment landscape coincides with intense political and judicial pushback against DE&I policies that is having a chilling effect from the corporate C-suite to the institutions of higher education. Under the pretense of colorblindness and unconscious bias, the impact appears to be our imminent exclusion. Well, we will not be excluded. Black Enterprise, the #1 Black digital media brand, remains 100% committed to the professional and economic advancement of Black Americans. The future of work very much represents our future, and we must be determined to maximize opportunities for Black Americans as we meet the challenges of today's rapidly evolving environment. For tonight's exclusive town hall discussion, we brought together an exciting lineup of experts and thought leaders to share their insights and offer a path forward. We aim to inform and generate dialogue, but most importantly, to inspire action. The future is a common concern and a shared responsibility. We owe it to tomorrow's generation to ensure that we keep pace with change and leverage its opportunities at all levels of our community. So let's get started. To kick off tonight's session, I would like to thank our good friends at Nationwide for their continued long-term partnership. Now, please help me welcome Vanita Clemens, Nationwide's Executive Vice President and Chief Human Resources Officer, to share opening remarks. Vanita?
Thank you, Butch, for that wonderful introduction. Hello, everyone. I am Vanita Clemens, Chief Human Resource Officer at Nationwide. I am pleased to welcome you to the Black Enterprise Town Hall, where our topic is the future of work. As a longtime supporter of the invaluable programming Black Enterprise provides, Nationwide is also proud to be a co-sponsor of this event. Today, we have the opportunity to engage in a crucial conversation about the evolving dynamics of the workplace and its profound implications for the African American workforce across generations. In an era where technology relentlessly reshapes industries and redefines traditional employment structures, the future of work stands at a crossroads. This session aims to delve deep into the emerging trends and challenges that shape this landscape, while also spotlighting opportunities for growth and empowerment. I am honored to be joined by esteemed panelists who will bring a wealth of knowledge and expertise to this discussion. During this session, we will explore a myriad of topics critical to understanding the future of work. We'll address the impact of automation and AI, the rise of remote and flexible work arrangements, the dynamics of the gig economy, and the imperative of upskilling and reskilling in an ever-changing job market. Furthermore, we will examine the importance of diversity, equity, and inclusion in shaping workplaces that harness the full potential of every individual, and the pivotal role of historical Black colleges and universities in preparing graduates for success in corporate America. As we embark on this journey together, let's embrace the opportunity to envision a future of work that is inclusive, equitable, and empowering for all. Thank you for joining us. Now, to get us started, we're honored to have the distinguished presence of Ed Gordon, President of Ed Gordon Media and an award-winning journalist of the highest caliber, who will introduce our panelists and moderate the discussion. Ed?
Thank you, Vanita. As Butch has already laid out in his remarks, once again, America's workforce finds itself in an era-defining transformation. The changes are fundamental, and no industry or community will be spared the consequences. For Black Americans, the potential impact could either undo decades of economic and social progress or be the start of providing unprecedented periods of opportunities. AI, the gig economy, diminishing DEI initiatives will tackle them all. We'll also look at the role of HBCUs and how they can play as a positive in all of this. Let me introduce our guest. First, Paula Fontana. She currently serves as Vice President, Corporate Partner Development for the National Black MBA Association, which is considered the premier organization for Black professionals, providing career opportunities and professional development. Sekou Biddle, Vice President for Advocacy and the Student Professional Development Program for the UNCF. He prepares students to navigate from college to early stage careers by exposing them to industry sector career opportunities. And lastly, Ariel Lopez, founder and CEO of NAC, a hiring platform that reduces bias in the application process and improves the experience for job candidates. She's also worked in the tech and marketing sectors with companies including Nike, Google, and Uber. Welcome to you all. Let me start by throwing this out. We hear the phrase future of the workforce, and we probably hear that every 20, 25 years or so. If I may, Mr. Biddle, I'll ask you to start us off with the idea of how fair of a question is that? Can we, in fact, figure out what the future of any workforce is?
I would say, Ed, I think our past as a predictor, like we've been pretty poor at predicting what the future of the workforce looks like. I think back to the days when I was in college and what I was told we needed in the workplace, and that turned out to be dramatically different than what it actually is. I think what's important for us to keep in mind is that there are certainly a set of skills primarily around the ability to learn how to learn that really, really are going to be important for anybody in the future of their career and in the future of the workforce.
Ms. Lopez, I see you shaking your head. Give me a sense of what you thought about what he said there, you being, I would venture to say, the youngest of us all on the panel.
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't know if I've been around for every evolution, circa 25 years.
Yeah,
I'm
nor have I, but go ahead.
I'm a 90s baby, but what I can say is that the future of work is rapidly changing. My field of expertise is technology. So when I think about the tech industry, it changes day by day. But I also think that has a great effect on what the future of work looks like, as well as the needs of the workforce as well.
Ms. Fontana, one of the things that we can say with certainty is though we've heard this every 25, 50 years or so, the speed of change is extraordinary now, faster than we've ever seen it. It would often be a slow turn of change. That isn't the case anymore.
You're absolutely right. I mean, faster than a speeding bullet, right? And I would completely co-sign with what Sekou said about making sure that we are focusing on those soft skills, because no matter what the future of work will be, those soft skills will be the ones that will carry us forward no matter what.
How much should we look at the idea that much of this, in terms of how we look at it, is generational? We were laughing just a second ago about, what Ariel has seen and certainly what I have seen, or the two of you over the years. Yet the outlook is very different for younger generations, particularly Gen Zs. Give me an idea of that difference. How much of it is simply youth? Not maybe knowing the full breadth of it, and how much of it is just the change of the world?
So I would say for the younger generation, I mean, they grew up with technology or are growing up with technology. So it is intuitive. They don't have to think about it. They just know how to do it. You could see babies sort of fiddling with gadgets, whereas those of us who perhaps are in the older generation, we have to actively try and remember to remain relevant, which is why we continue to do it. So again, for us, it is more thinking, more harder. It's not necessarily hard coded within us as it is with the younger generation.
Sekou, I hear that often, but one of the things I remind people of is what this young and younger generations have not seen is stability. I mean, when I grew up, there was a stable workforce. You could work somewhere and know that you, if you chose to, would retire there. They don't know that, good or bad.
Well, that's absolutely right, and I think what Paula said earlier is really important to keep in mind. It's change is a concept. What we've seen in the last couple of decades is just the increasing rate of change, which is kind of dizzying. And I think you're right, Ed. We used to be able to tell people, like, here's what you can expect to see over the next 10, 20, 30 years. I think now, we might be to tell somebody, here's what you can expect to see over the next 2 to 3 years and be roughly accurate at that. And it's certainly challenging for younger workers because the ability to plot out the moves they're going to make are extremely challenging. The way technology is transforming things, like, you just never know what set of skills and knowledge will be helpful today that may be completely irrelevant in 5 years.
Yeah, Ariel, let me ask you about that because, and I don't know if you're a millennial, Gen X. Yeah, after a while,
I'm a
I'm just
proud
like,
millennial.
all right, so there you go. Give me a sense of how you even look at Gen Zs, because again, the dynamic that they have seen, they've grown up, all they've really known is war, a pandemic, the gig economy. They've not known stability. Even at your age, do you see a big difference? And what do you tell those who are coming behind you?
Yeah, absolutely. To Sekou's point in terms of expectations, I believe we never had the correct expectations. In fact, we had the false ones. So if I speak for millennials, we were told to go to college, get a job, buy your first home, which is almost impossible for the majority of us. And if we look at Gen Z, they're coming into a labor shortage, they're coming into inflation, they're coming into an extremely volatile market. Like 2008 was another recession. I was actually going into college at that point, so I didn't experience it fully. But if we're thinking about the tech sector specifically, it was a huge boom. A lot of businesses failed. If you look at the startups in the market today, a lot of them are closing up shop as well. So it's just a really hostile environment. And I would say for Gen Z, or for anyone that's actively job seeking, just know that it's not you because of how the market is today. I want to say for every 250 resumes a company receives, they talk to maybe 4 to 6 people. I would argue it's even lower depending on the company. So typically what happens, your resume gets routed to applicant tracking system. Because there's so much volume in those systems, it's systematically impossible for the recruiters to see everyone. So if you've ever gotten ghosted or you got one of those canned rejection emails and you're like, I applied for the job 5 minutes ago, there's no way they could have looked at my profile. There's no way they could have looked at my resume. That's absolutely true. So make your network your net worth. Over 85% of jobs were found through referrals. I don't think that changes anytime soon. I will say, I think there is this loom and doom of AI and automation and how that will affect the future of work. But I think anyone that's smart is thinking of how they can leverage it in their specific position or skill set, depending on what they're doing.
We're going to get into that in just a minute, though, Ariel. I would remind them sometimes it is you. You know, so let's be clear about that too. Paula, let me ask you, what she just said is remarkable to me because again, and this is not, you know, the old guy get off my grass, but what it is a change and a shift in America. The idea that there are people of a certain age, under 30 certainly, who don't see the idea of home ownership. And at the end of the day, when we talk about generational wealth and wealth in this country, you know, your biggest ball of that is still going to be for the vast majority of people, home ownership. What do you tell people who don't even see that as a reality?
Yeah, that is definitely troubling. I will say on the positive side of that, though, that younger generation, because they are always changing, whether it's be changing jobs or used to this changing environment, the ability to change and pivot is not uncomfortable for them. So they really lean into that and feel like they are creating new avenues for wealth that perhaps that older generation had not yet considered. So you are right that the home ownership piece is a big piece of that. But again, they are really navigating other ways and figuring out how to do it either further greater than generations prior.
And Sekou, what I would say to that is I agree 1000% with Paula, but my fear is with all the pivoting, it's short-lived often. So, you know, you pivot here and I even talk about influencers who, you know, may be 20 and even under, but let's just say 20 to 30 who make 6 figures on social media. But how long are you really going to be an influencer? You know, by the time you get 30, there are going to be people behind you that are influencing. How long are you going to keep that? And the ability to really try to have wealth with some legs to it is my concern.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think Ed, an important point there is that we got to be honest with young people and everyone in the workforce about our economic system, right? Like it's capitalism, and capitalism, right, values the acquisition of capital that then you invest and grow your owning your investments. And I think to your point about there are a great number of opportunities for a person to potentially make lots of money early in their career, but often the careers are very short. I mean, we're watching right now in the last 2 weeks the WNBA draft and the NFL draft. Young people who are going to make lots of money early in their careers, and whose careers are going to be very, very short. The path to wealth, as you mentioned, has been traditionally through home ownership. It's also been small business ownership. But at the end of the day, we've got to be clear that young people entering the workforce understand that the path to wealth has to include ownership of something. Because if you don't own things that grow in their value, then you're going to be chasing this thing, and the ability for just simply your labor to earn enough money to grow your wealth is really, really challenging in the system.
I want to talk about something before we get into AI and DEI and all of the things we're going to talk about in just a few moments. But during the time we find ourselves in within an election year, numbers are always thrown out. And I think we have to be very careful. If you look at last year, the jobless rate, particularly for African Americans juxtaposed to whites, has closed, but the wealth gap has not. The wealth gap actually has widened a bit. What does that tell us, and what do we need to look at? Because at the end of the day, it's not that you have a job, it's what you make in that job and are allowed to keep by virtue of the system, whether it be taxes, whether it be inflation, whether it be any number, a myriad of things that can impact that. Anybody?
Wow, I mean, that's heavy. I mean, you think about changes in generations. I mean, you think about it wasn't really that long ago that the workforce had the expectation of guaranteed pensions, right, in jobs and careers, and that is something that for the most part does not exist anymore. So they once again, any young person starting their career has got to be thinking about the work that they do, but also their path to investment and savings for their future, and whether that's employer sponsored programs. And I would say to anybody listening, if your employer is matching in 401k or 403b, like, you have got to find a way to maximize that. I mean, it's free money, but yet there are a lot of people who still are not yet convinced that it's worth taking the free money, and I think that's just so important for young people to know, because as you talked about, people are going to change jobs and sometimes going to change careers. But the long-term path to like building wealth is necessary unless you're gonna, work until your dying day, which we really don't want for anybody.
Mm-hmm. And I would say that racial wealth gap, I mean, it's a systemic issue, and it's not one that will just change on a dime. Our whole society has to be intentional about changing that gap. So the government, corporations, us as its constituents. So it's not just an easy switch that we can flip. It has to be, again, intentional.
Ariel,
Indeed.
jump in. Yeah, jump in.
Yeah, I was going to say on the topic of generating wealth, I think there was a miseducation or maybe just some misinformation that happened, specifically for millennials, for Gen Z. When you think about financial literacy, it's just something that is completely lacking, especially in the Black and Brown communities. So there's a lot of work that we need to do. Like Sekou spoke of a 401k. There's a lot of people that don't know what that means for them. They don't know what it means to have a life insurance policy. They don't know
Let me interrupt you there for
Yeah.
a second. I've got to push back a little bit, because here's what I would say. I would say that it's not that the teaching isn't out there, because
Okay.
it is. I can't tell you generationally, I've done programs that banks put forward and the like, that hedge fund management did, particularly people like John Rogers with Ariel Capital and many others. It's that people, and I'm not talking about just Gen Z, Gen X, millennials. I'm talking about boomers and the like, have not always taken advantage of the knowledge that is out there. I think it's been fear more than anything.
Yeah.
It's kept us away.
Yeah, I would agree with that. But I would also agree there are a lot of efforts that happen on a continuous basis that aren't necessarily working, and the people that are in charge don't always take the time to actually
Agreed.
back from the audiences in which they're trying to impact, right? So if we're thinking of younger audiences, knowing that they spend the majority of their time behind a screen, whether it be their phone or their TV or their laptop, how are we reaching them in a digital environment, and what does that mean? I think in terms of understanding your options within the workplace, that's a corporate responsibility. And there are a lot of companies that do a terrible job of letting people know what they're getting themselves into, right? The onus is very much on the workforce to kind of figure out, what is this trajectory for me? How do I take advantage of whatever resources may be available to me internally? Although obviously HR is there to do that, they don't always do the best job of making sure that that information is getting into the right hands. So I think there's a lot in terms of education, there's something that needs to be addressed. But I think you mentioned something interesting as well in terms of where the money is coming from. We're very much in a gig economy right now. That's going to continue to increase in the coming years. I think the younger workforce, unfortunately, are working 3, 4, 5 work from home remote jobs just to make ends meet. Like at some point, we have to address the cost of living and what it means to work in this country, right? And you have a lot of people that quite literally are sacrificing their lives. But in terms of the money, the dollars aren't necessarily making sense. So
I want to jump into the gig economy if we can. So let's use that as our transition. And I'll throw this out, Paula, if you'll tackle it first. What we are seeing though is I think there were generations who, particularly those who were interested in business, saw corporate America as the Holy Grail. And they believed that if I just do that, I'll be set for life. And that was true for a couple of generations. Yet you started to see, as times got leaner and the economy got rougher, that the corporation was no longer handing out a gold watch, and they didn't care if they had to show you to the door. To your point, the idea of pivoting, you have a generation that isn't as beholden to corporations and conglomerates. What they are saying is, I'm going to figure out how to make this work. And also, quite frankly, having a better balance of leisure time and time for oneself. So what do you see from afar as you look at that? And what would you give as a bit of advice to find that balance? Because at the end of the day, it's easy to have that leisure time in your 20s. And then your 30s and 40s come and some other responsibilities come a knocking, whether you have children or not.
Right. Yeah, so we are increasing our programming at the National Black MBA Association around the gig economy and leaning into entrepreneurship. And we've seen our members do both and. So keeping their corporate careers, however, trying out that entrepreneurial effort on the side until that side gig becomes the main gig. So that is a great way of just sort of beginning to build, whether it be your book of business, your skill set, your knowledge base, so that once you do step out on your own, you are much more successful than you would have been without that knowledge. And then having that support system of people to help you, let's say you are a startup, how do you get from 0 to 5 years and then go to 10 years? So what are those continual skills and things that you need in order to be successful at each stage of those businesses?
Yeah,
Say
Paul,
cool.
yeah, that's hugely important. I mean, for one, just simply building the flexibility and the sort of personal know-how to like be an entrepreneur and potentially go out on your own, whether or not you ever actually go full time on your own is hugely important. Because if for no reason other than it helps a person have options, right? Like when you've got control of your own work path and career, there's a lot of optionality you can exercise. I think the one caution I would give to young people today is to be very careful to understand, a lot of the gig economy today, and especially the, things that are sort of run through apps, people misunderstand the business model. And we have a lot of young people in the workforce today who are working to make investors wealthy, barely getting by themselves, and don't understand the actual underpinning of the business they're working for. And they don't realize that like they're the low cost labor that's making somebody else a boatload of money. And I think it's important to understand, like, be an entrepreneur, build your business, like leverage the assets and opportunities that are available, but have a path and a plan for yourself.
Yeah, I saw you shaking your head, Aria. Oh, go ahead, Paula. Sorry.
All right. Having the gig economy help you with your main gig is also a possibility,
Yeah.
right? So one of the things that you have to lean into are, what are the accomplishments? What are the contributions that you are making, or else you won't get those new gigs.
Yeah.
And so being able to articulate those accomplishments will also help you if you can do that for your main gig as well, realizing that's how you have that longevity that we talked about, get promoted and get to the next level.
Aria, I saw you shaking your head in the affirmative as Sekou was talking about that, because it is interesting. I know you worked with or for Uber for a while. The idea of, for instance, if you're an Uber driver, at the end of the day, Uber is a company, it is a corporation. And so you are really no different than, a driver at FedEx or Ford Motor Company that drives the trucks. And so while the gig economy may not be tied to one particular company, much of, as Paula suggested, that kind of what America deems as low level work is still there. How do you think, as you talk to folks, how do you think they see that?
Yeah, I mean, I think the majority of the workers that are a part of the gig economy are there because they need to be, not necessarily because they want to be. And to Paula's point, it's unfortunate. I think a lot of people don't necessarily understand what those transferable skills may be. So you have these periods of time to where maybe you're away from corporate America and you don't know how to make that return or what that looks like the next time that you go looking for a full-time job. Like, do I even mention that I was an Uber or a DoorDash driver? And my advice to these people is pick and choose what you want to be a part of your narrative. We talked about what the recruiting process looks like, and unfortunately, the majority of recruiters are trained to judge. They're trained to judge based off of where you worked previously, where you went to school, who you know. Access to social capital is everything. So I think you have to learn how to take control over your narrative and do things that are in alignment with what you want to do and where you want to go next. I think Paula made a really good point as far as how working a gig or working your side hustle ultimately, or even your 9 to 5, can have a major impact on the business that you start. I myself started my career as a tech recruiter. I ended up transitioning into career coaching. I worked at General Assembly, which is one of the biggest boot camps in the world. And from that experience working with startups, being at a startup, the next natural step for me was just to go out and start my own thing. So there's something in the industry that we like to call domain expertise. This means you actually wore the shoes and you understand the problem that you're trying to solve because you actually experienced it before. I've seen that pattern play out time and time again, especially in tech. It's not always, the Harvard dropout, like a Zuckerberg. Sometimes it's someone that used to work at Google and they find 2 or 3 other people that worked at Google during the same time. And they say, you know what, let's go out and start.
We can do this.
Exactly. And those companies get funded. They have exits every single day. And so I 100% think your 9 to 5 will inform whatever that business venture would be. And my hope is that we stop some of the discourse. I think there's been a war between having a 9 to 5 or being an entrepreneur. I can say there's definitely a glamorizing of entrepreneurship that happens as well. You have this idea that you're your own boss and you don't have to talk to anyone or listen to anyone or answer to anyone, when it's actually the complete opposite of that, right? But both sides feed each other. They're both needed. And I think the people that become the wealthiest have an understanding of how to make both work for them.
Yeah, well, you are your own boss, but you may find out quickly that your boss doesn't know as much as he thinks he does. So that's the frightening thing. Let me ask you guys this, because what Ariel said there, I think I don't want it to just rush by, and that is the importance of social capital. Again, it used to be the idea that you could turn in a resume, the resume would be looked at by HR, it would be passed on. Today, I feel for people who just believe, okay, I'm going to fill out this application, or I'm going to kick a resume to them. 9 times out of 10, frankly, and I don't, you don't want to be the killer of a dream, but I always believe in reality. 9 times out of 10, if somebody doesn't walk a resume into somebody's office or say, hey, I've got a good applicant for this, they're not even looking at these resumes most of the time.
You are absolutely right. I mean, if you are looking for a transition, get you an Ariel. So she already talked about the fact that your network is your net worth. Absolutely, 100%. We are seeing that on our end as well, to your point, Ed, about walking people's resumes over. When there's an opening, you're more likely to get that job filled through a referral than any other means.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. And I think, it points to something that's, I think, crucial for all of us to think about in the workforce. Like, as fundamentally social creatures, like, most people are pre-programmed to respond yes to requests for help. And I think, anyone at any point in their career needs to be thinking about, who do I have within my reach that I could ask for their assistance? That assistance might be time, might be guidance, might be advice, maybe a whole bunch of things. And I think it's hugely important. And, you talked, Ed, earlier about like what the workforces looked like, and especially like in the transition post-COVID. A challenge for a lot of folks who've just started their career in a way more remote world of work is there are a lot less of those informal connections they're building. I mean, that, it used to be in any meeting you were in, there was a few minutes before the meeting where people got to meet each other, and there's a few minutes after the meeting when things were breaking up where you built some of those connections. Now, in the all virtual meeting, that ceases to exist. So the worker who's looking to grow their network has to explore other means of doing that, or has to be much more intentional about, how do we get to places that are in person, where I get face to face, where I build, my network, and get not only do I get to know people, but people get to know me, because
Right.
ultimately there's a part of this that is, the social capital that exists because people know you and like you, whether or not they know what you're good at. Like them liking you enough to say, I'll take this call, I'll take this meeting, has a huge amount of value in the
And more
workforce.
importantly, I'll take this chance often.
Yeah.
Right. Let me ask you guys this before we move to DE and I, which is some will say I'm doing a story on it now, and some will say it is under full attack. But we'll get to that in just a minute. Let me ask you about the idea of what many thought coming out of the pandemic was going to be our norm, not quite our norm. And I was surprised at the number of businesses who did not want people to go totally remote, even the businesses that showed that there wasn't a decline within the output of the business. And I think some workers, people want the social aspect of work, but let's look at the future. How much do you believe that we are going to ultimately become a workforce that is remote, that works from home or elsewhere?
Mm, I don't believe we'll be 100% remote again unless forced to do so, like with the pandemic. Because to Sekou's point, I mean, there's so much value in just those sidebar conversations that happen in the hallway, in the conference room, that you can't put a value on that. It doesn't happen virtually, just the ability to connect and collaborate. So that's why I don't believe that we'll be 100% remote ever.
Yeah.
Ariel, what isn't said there though, and it wasn't the time, but eventually they will do dollars to dollars in terms of juxtaposing them and see, while all that spurs some ideas and some other things that maybe Zoom does not. When I look at brick and mortar costs, particularly in cities like New York, a DC, a San Francisco, I start to think, well, maybe it ain't so bad that we just do this on Zoom. What's your thinking there?
I see both sides. I mean, I will say I agree with Paula. I don't think we will see a world unless forced where it's 100% remote again. But I also don't think we will ever see a world where it's 100% in person again. And I am very grateful for that. I think companies that are smart will continue to have remote as an option. I do think there's been a large return towards these hybrid models, but if I can speak for the job seekers, just let it be remote. Like we've proven it can be done. And the pandemic has showed us nothing else. Like I don't need to be in the office with you. And here's the thing, it's not just spending time in the office, it's the commute that is completely unnecessary, especially if we're talking about a New York, a San Francisco, any LA. I live in Atlanta. I don't even want to think about driving because of the traffic. Like if you can save me a trip, I will be eternally grateful. And then part two of that, especially if we're talking, I know we're going to transition into D&I on behalf of Black and Brown communities, anyone that's ever experienced a microaggression at work. I remember the last time it happened to me, it was when Mike Brown died. I guess none of us were really around for George Floyd, but I could only imagine having to be by the water cooler, having a conversation with someone and trying to teach them as to why this is problematic. Like there are so many moments that are saved because people have that option to work from home and be most comfortable. And if we're talking about how desires are changing, especially from generation to generation, this generation doesn't care about compensation as much as they used to. That used to be the North Star. And I think a lot of people would still find it to be a top priority. However, flexibility, autonomy, your culture, like, can I show up authentically as myself? Like, I need to be comfortable coming to work every single day. And I think having that remote option made it a lot easier for people to do that. So again, I think companies that care about their future headcount and they don't want to see really, really high rates of attrition are going to make sure that they continue to have a remote option for people, and employees will leave you because
And
of
it
that.
will be interesting to see, Sekou, what Ariel just said there, because I think she's right about how a younger generation sees that, but they've not lived long enough to determine whether or not that compensation at the end of the day becomes the most important thing. You can want to be you and authentic and all that, but when you hit 50 and 60, if that compensation hasn't helped you along, you'll be authentically broke.
Mercy, mercy.
Yeah, I mean that's true, and something that Ariel said that I think is truly important that we got to be really honest about is when you take into consideration like the commute. I mean, I think something real has happened, which is for a lot of people to not have the commute. There's two benefits, right? There's the one that people spend some of that time on themselves, and that's whether they have more leisure time to exercise, or other things to like live their life. But the other is some of that time gets poured back into work. And I think employers have got to be a little bit more honest about how, in some ways, there's benefits for everybody when you just sort of let go of the rope on making you come sit in the office just to be here doesn't really drive a lot of benefit for either side. I think we got to be more intentional about what are we trying to do when we are in person? Like, is there something that we actually get some real benefit from, and make the in-person time about doing those things? Because the things that we can do remotely, like we remove a lot of friction in people's lives. I mean, to those of us who've raised children, I mean, the getting kids to and from school and all of that, like make people's lives a lot easier. And I do honestly believe that, like, for employers, there is the part about being a more competitive employer, more attractive employees, because employees are going to continue to judge employers on, not only do you let me be authentically myself, but are you going to like help me thrive as a person and as an employee? Because if the answer isn't yes, then I might need to find a place where that's possible.
You've got to change the default position, though, from those who own the company, who will initially default to, if I let you stay at home, you're not going to work as hard. That's the default position, I think, for ownership. So it'll be interesting to see.
But I would say, though, that even though we talk about the importance of Black and Brown being able to be authentically themselves at home, but I need to be authentically myself in person too. And so employers need to make sure that there's that balance. And then for Black and Brown, I would say it is we have to make sure that we are intentional about building that community when we are remote, because then it becomes easy for them to forget us, exclude us. So making sure that there are still pathways for us to connect within the organization.
It's just terribly difficult to legislate feeling, right? And that typically is simply white culture saying, can't wear your hair like this. You must look like this. You must wear that, which is why I think at the end of the day, and this we'll get into with DE&I, and let's do that now. The question of, do they really want you at the dance? If you look at where we are, you have to really ask that question again. How much do I really want you in the workforce? How much do I really want to make you feel comfortable? How much do I really appreciate what you bring to the table? Because in spite of many studies that have been done to show that diversity is good for the bottom line, and we know that's always the default for corporate America. What's the bottom line? What's the bottom line? Sekou, it doesn't seem to have translated to that when we talk about diversity. It doesn't seem like most companies, I won't say all, but many don't necessarily say, well, look at what these studies have shown. We need to kind of spread this diversity around.
Well, yeah, I mean, you started talking about it earlier. I mean, a lot of that is about the culture, right? Like, because, let's be honest, like, because creating an environment that is inclusive and welcoming to all makes some people uncomfortable. Well, if I'm in the people that are made uncomfortable by doing that and I'm in charge, I default to like, yeah, let's not do that. And I think you're right. Like, in spite of the fact that the data at scale tells us that more diverse, inclusive environments are more productive, more successful. If I'm the decider and I don't like it, it makes me uncomfortable, then I'm going to decide to do something that I'm comfortable with. And I think, unfortunately, we've seen this in the American economy over and over again. Like, corporations, organizations will choose comfort even over like productivity unless and until like they are forced to do so, or they're just pushed out of the marketplace. And some corporations will go down in flames because they will not change. I think, unfortunately, this is one of those things, to hint at two earlier points, like it is both systemic and requires individuals to like, take a hard stance and like be relentless about not giving in on things that are really, really important to them. but we also can't ask for individual by individual to change the mindset of corporate America.
Paula, your thought? I mean,
Um,
you all deal with this at Black
oh,
MBAs all the time.
absolutely. And, in 2020, right after, George Floyd and the whole racial awakening, we saw a lot more companies raising their hands saying that diversity was important to them, saw increased funding, and now we're seeing some of those companies pull back. But the great thing that we've also been seeing is that our partners who have been with us for decades remain with us, and they're just having to shift what that looks like, what the strategy is. And I most recently was talking with a CEO of one of our partners, and he said it was about the bottom line. And so if I have diverse problems, I need a diverse workforce to help me solve those problems. And as long as I'm continuing to increase that bottom line, nobody's going to tell me to stop doing that. And so our companies have again stayed with us. Diversity is important to them, but they are also leaning into now the whole idea of inclusion and belonging. So to your analogy, Ed, about the dance, making sure that everyone has the right shoes to dance, as well as their favorite songs are also playing at the dance. So everybody feels like they belong in the space.
Ariel, give me a sense of what you talk to, those who are entering the workforce who may not have the same opportunities, because, my argument remains, if everything were equal and everything were right, we would not need DE&I initiatives. The fact that they're there speaks to the reality of a workforce. Have you talked about young people who, are following this, who may be concerned that the opportunities are becoming less and less?
Yeah, I mean, if I could just start and agree with you, Ed, like, I think the issue here, again, this is a systemic problem. But in addition to that, if we talk about the business case for corporate America, they still consider D&I to be social charity, like it's impact work. No one is actively thinking about the bottom line in that way. And there's this thesis that for some reason, whether it be affirmative action or an increase in D&I initiatives, that we are somehow moving the bar or we're lowering the bar. And I absolutely hate that, because that's not the case. Like, it was never fair to begin with. So if anything, we are creating an equalizer. We are making sure that things are becoming more fair and less biased by changing these processes and changing these systems. Like, quite literally nothing will change if we don't. So I think there's a lot that needs to be addressed on that side. As far as people that are entering the workforce now and some of the younger job seekers, I feel for them, especially as we look at what's happening on the affirmative action front. Like, specifically, Duke just got rid of their scholarship. I know Florida continues to do absolute insane things, but Florida is known for doing insane things. I don't even think they're going to be teaching people in Florida in 10 to 20 years, so we'll see. But my advice to those coming in is just to really have a good understanding of what you're getting yourself into. So if we talk about what that process looks like, if you know there's a high possibility that the recruiter is not going to see your application or see your resume, what are you doing to make sure that there is a possibility of getting that visibility? So that means reaching out to a recruiter, finding the job poster, finding someone that works on the team, whether it be an HR or a hiring manager, and sending a direct follow-up saying, hi, nice to meet you. I applied for this role. Here's the link to the role. I would love to learn a little bit more about the job and the opportunity at hand. Do you have time to speak with me? I would say roughly 90% of job seekers don't do that. And there's power in the follow-up. Just think of your inbox. Like, there's probably 100 things that you were supposed to get back to that you haven't yet. And if you don't get that reminder, if you don't get someone to kind of ping you and remind you that they reached out, are you actually going to do that? So I think there's power in the follow-up. There's power in social capital, which we already alluded to, making sure that you're building meaningful relationships, looking for mentors, looking for advisors, looking for people that can act as referrals for you in the future, and then just continuing to be the best you that you can be from a professional perspective, whether that's skills or certifications, becoming involved with nonprofit organizations, serving on boards, doing consulting, freelancing. Like, there's a lot of different avenues that I think people can kind of not only build their expertise, but also the value that they're adding to potential organizations as well. So just making sure that they're keeping those things top of mind as they enter their job search, but also know this is a systemic problem.
Yeah, and we should note that while Florida was first in the low-hanging fruit, Texas in lockstep, Utah, Alabama, and most recently Iowa striking DE&I on many public colleges. So, the fight there continues. Let me ask you all something else before we move to AI as relates to DE&I. There are some African Americans who are suggesting that maybe we're hanging on to an initiative, some programs that were well-meaning but have outlived their usefulness because of the way corporations are utilizing them, i.e., giving somebody a corner office but no direct report, no real power for change, and no real monies. It's good for the annual report. You get to say, I gave the NAACP X, Y, and Z, but no real change comes of that. Any merit there at all?
Hmm. Hmm. That's a great question. And if you are the recipient of those, it's also about what is important to you. So if for some reason that corner office brings you joy, then I would say by all means embrace the opportunities provided to you. But I would also encourage us to go where we are celebrated, not necessarily just tolerated. And so if diversity is truly important to that organization, they will find a way. It won't just be a tally mark or checkbox. It will be, again, a part of that culture. And that sort of leads into what I said about going when you are celebrated. So making sure that you find that space that truly celebrates who you are as that whole you.
Sekou, before we move to AI, I want to ask you about the importance of HBCUs, not only in this fight, but readying African American students for not just the workforce, but I think where HBCUs can really do justice is being honest about what you will face once you leave this campus.
Well, correct. And I think, something that Paula said stuck out to me earlier, which is that, she talked about partners who they've been working with for a very long time, who all these new, this new friction has not changed their resolve. I think we shouldn't lose sight of the fact that, some of this hubbub about this, is going to shake loose some whose resolve just isn't there. And that's okay. But there are a great many institutions and partners that really and truly believe, and in fact, have needed some of this noise to be reminded why they're doing these things. I think, as far as HBCUs are concerned, for, now 175 years, they've really worked at helping, in particular, young Black people get prepared to deal with the world the way the world exists and in their time, and to succeed and to thrive in that world. And that's, building of their strength of character, knowledge, skill, but also, being upfront about the harsh realities that many of these people are going to face when they walk into the world of work, and essentially inoculating them against some of the early, issues that they're going to face in, oftentimes a very racist society and culture. And what we've seen is that support has for generations provided so many young people the strength they needed to persist in really adverse conditions and thrive. I think we need to be thinking about doing more and more of it. And I think we need to continue to push corporations and others to really examine for themselves, what are you prepared to do to help us actualize the ideals that this nation has said that we're about? Because we got to make a decision here. We're going to be about the things we say we're about, or we're not going to be about those things. And I think part of the tension right now is some people are saying, oh, yeah, no, we don't really want to be about those things. And others are getting, essentially scared and terrorized out of having the resolve to do what's right. And I think we've got to make sure that we provide some cover and some leadership so that people can stick with it and do the right thing.
Yeah, it really is. Often, I remember being at an event with Congresswoman Maxine Waters, and she talked about needing to give cover to those who are in corporations who are fighting the good fight, It's too easy if they don't have it to see them either as the angry black person, or just let them make the noise in the corner and we'll just kind of push ourselves. And so it's important for all of us to know what corporations and companies are doing well by us, to support those companies, and also to give cover to those who fight. Before I move to AI and throw the first lob over to Ariel, Paul, I saw your facial expression when I talked about HBCUs and what they can do and their importance. I was curious what you were thinking at that point.
So it um, sort of co-signed what I was saying about going where you're celebrated and not where you're tolerated. So in this space of questioning DEI and some of the universities pulling back, we have been seeing increase in applications for HBCUs, which is a beautiful thing, us embracing something that truly celebrates who we are, to Sekou's point.
Yeah. All right, Ariel, let me bring AI into this. And with the acknowledgement that no one on this panel and no one in this world really knows where we're going with this thing. It's changing minute by minute by minute. Those who quote unquote created it aren't really sure where it's going. And, just as other technologies and other advances in society, when they said that it was gloom and doom and our world was going to be destroyed, including a TV that seems so very innocuous in some instances today, did not send us, well, maybe it did, but we've survived it. Give me a sense of how you view AI right now, and how our community should look at it, not as being frightened of it as much as maybe getting on the front end of it, because too often, because of a racial strife and inequality, we've always been on the back end of industries. How do we make sure that we're on the front end of one?
Yeah, absolutely. I think AI is rapidly changing. To your point, I think there's a lot of opportunity. The interesting thing is currently roughly 45% of the activities that we do on a day-to-day can be automated, or we can use AI to do those things. So that's something to keep in mind. However, 73% of people feel like there's still going to have to be a human element, i.e., there's no way that AI will be able to do everything. And I completely agree with that. I think people that want to get ahead will be smart about how they're leveraging AI in their day-to-day and whatever it is that they choose to do. So if we think about ChatGPT, and there's a lot of other models that you can utilize now as well. But if you are a digital marketer, that's your copywriting. Instead of having to come up with the blog post or even come up with topics to post on social media, you literally pick the right prompt in ChatGPT and it will regurgitate whatever it is that you need. You can do anything from generating wireframes to coming up with the web pages to building out a meal plan, if that's what you're interested in doing. There's so many use cases of AI. And I think that's the exciting part. However, the concerning part is how it was originally established. So if you look at the founding fathers of AI, it was maybe 5 white men that banded together to say, let's build this, and this is what it's going to look like. And AI is only as smart as the data that we give them. And that's the issue that we're having today. I forget the young woman that did the study, but essentially there was some type of face application that she was utilizing to where AI was unfortunately unable to recognize her face. But if you think of the model and how it was trained, is it even trained to recognize what a Black face may look like? Mm-hmm. So that's kind of where we're running into, I would say, authenticity issues. There's definitely a variety of privacy concerns as well, but it's going to be kind of hard to determine what's real and what's not. We're already seeing a lot of that right now. In the world of hip hop, there's been a lot of rap beef as of late. But there was a song that came out that Drake actually recorded, but for roughly 2 to 3 days, the entire discourse online was like, is this a Drake song or is this AI? And no one could tell. And I was like, this is going to be a really big problem if this is where we are today. So we need to start thinking about that. But I do think there's a lot of opportunity for, if we're thinking about the workforce specifically, how you can utilize AI to automate some of your jobs to where it's not so overwhelming and you can work smarter and not harder. But if we think of it from an industry lens, there's a lot that needs to be done around policy and around regulation for AI to actually be safe. I wouldn't say it's safe right now. So we have a long way to go.
And now I will be the old man on the lawn. This rap beef thing, man, and as often as it's taken up, man, time to talk about. Oh my God. All right. Sekou, let me ask you in relation to AI, and though we don't know what we do see, whether it's with automation, AI, there is a decrease in the workforce for what before was manual labor, low-level labor. And it always allowed those who could not afford to go to college, who could not, for whatever reasons, kind of find their way into what was deemed white collar jobs back in the day. We aren't starting to see replacements for some of those areas. Concern on your part there?
Yeah, concerned, because I think what you're alluding to, Ed, is that there used to be an era when there were high quality, high income, low skill jobs you could start and have a career in.
And make good money in, let's be clear.
Right.
And make good money.
And you could have a productive career, raise a family, and all those things. And that is really evaporating. I think one of the things we've got to keep in mind with AI, artificial intelligence, that we need to not be afraid of it, but we've got to be building real human intelligence in order for people to be able to manage an AI world, and also to think about the fact that the knowledge and skill needed to be successful in a knowledge economy is going to require some amount of post-secondary education. Obviously, we at UNCF believe in creating opportunities for everyone to go to college, get a college degree, and that continues to be important. But I think we also have to be really honest about the fact that the future of low-skill, high-wage work is rapidly disappearing, and everyone needs to be thinking about what's the post-secondary education I get. And frankly, a lot of people who have even a bachelor's degree or further need to be thinking about what's the future of my learning path, education and otherwise, and training that's going to keep me relevant in a world in which the knowledge and skills needed to be successful and to be, to thrive in the workplace continue to evolve and change.
Paula, I want to give you an opportunity before we get to closing thoughts here to speak to that idea in the sense of, particularly with your group, people who go on beyond their secondary education and continue to thrive educationally. Unfortunately, we've not been able to make that. And I'm not solely talking about the economic hindrances of the wealth gap that does not allow us sometimes to go on to obtain these degrees, but the idea that our community hasn't always been trained to believe that, higher education is helpful in a way. It used to be, I think, again, you were told, and I think about churches who raised money to make sure that we could get this kid to college and the like. We're starting to lose some of that. I'm curious what your organization is doing to make sure that it's not lost to advance your education beyond, what you might deem normal.
So our membership actually begins as young as high school students with a program we have called Leaders of Tomorrow, where we mentor them about their post-secondary options. And so for us, with our membership being high school all the way through experienced professionals and entrepreneurs, it's really about instilling programming that helps you to build on each level, understand what that world of possibility looks like for you, and then incorporating programming to help you skill, reskill so that you can be successful at each stage.
All right, let me give you all a chance as we're at the end of the town hall here, just to give some closing thoughts. I always believe in letting panelists give some marching orders. It's not enough just to listen. There really should be some marching orders to people as they move forward. Sekou, I'll start with you.
Sure. Thanks a lot, Ed. I appreciate the time for the conversation today. I mean, the thing I would say to everyone is you have got to know as a worker today and in the future, what is it you're doing to build, refine, grow your skill set? And as Ariel pointed out, grow your network and sort of knowledge-based people you have access to. it's hard to know what the future is going to be. But if you think that you're going to make it successfully to the future doing what you're doing today, you are probably sadly mistaken. And I think, we also, and I want to make a hint of something Paula raised earlier, we've also got to get really clear-eyed about things we need to do that are going to be public policy changes. Like the fact that the cost of a college education and beyond continues to outpace any other metric out there. I mean, we have got to address this. Like college and post-secondary education cannot become a luxury good. I mean, it's a necessary thing for so many people. So, I would just ask people to be thinking about how in their community and how with their elected officials they're working on solving for how do we keep college available and accessible and affordable for everyone. And then as workers, like how are we helping today's workers and future workers be on a path to continue to grow their knowledge and skill, be successful, and be leaders, not followers in the workplace.
Paula?
I would encourage us all to be continuous learners. So again, those skills, reskills, being able to understand how to communicate those transferable skills that you have, and then really leaning into the community so that as things begin to change, you bounce ideas off of your personal board of directors, if you will, so that you know how to pivot and what your unique selling proposition is that can help you move on to the next level.
Yeah, and I think it's important, as you called that, to make sure that you have a cadre of folk around you to make sure as you cross the street, they can give you a sense of whether that's the street you need to cross. Ariel, close us out if you would.
Yeah, well, thank you so much, first and foremost, Ed. This has been an amazing conversation. I really enjoyed the panel discussion as well. I would say for those in corporate America, D&I is not a nice to have, it is a must have. So let's all get on the same page about that. I would also say the future of work, it's only as good as the practices and the systems that we implement today. So we all need to make sure that we're creating a better tomorrow for everyone. I would say for anyone that's actively job seeking, or if you're in the workforce currently, learn how to play the game. That means understanding what your track record is, understanding how you add value, how to articulate that, how to sell yourself, how to build meaningful relationships in your network, taking risks, job hopping, making angel investments, doing everything that you have to do to make sure that you have a strong exit plan, because you will retire and you will leave the workforce one day. And you want to make sure that the things that you're doing today are going to help you get there.
Yeah, indeed. And as I said earlier, sometimes it is you. All right, Ariel, Sekou, Paula, thank you so much for a very entertaining and interesting conversation. And thank you for joining us for this very important town hall meeting. For all of us here at Black Enterprise, we hope you'll join us again. I'm Ed Gordon.
Thank you for joining us for tonight's Black Enterprise Town Hall on the future of work. My name is Derek Dingle, Chief Content Officer for Black Enterprise. We hope you've gained valuable information from this virtual experience. Apply the guidance you received on AI, hybrid workspaces, and upskilling to help you elevate your career. We would like to thank our dynamic moderator, Ed Gordon, as well as our esteemed panelists, Paula Fontana, Sekou Bitto, and Ariel Lopez for their nuggets of actionable advice. We would also like to extend our deep appreciation to our partner, Nationwide, for its role in producing tonight's program, including the compelling comments from its Executive Vice President and Chief Human Resources Officer, Benita Clemens. Remember, you can engage in on-demand viewings of this session on blackenterprise.com. We encourage you to share your thoughts and comments on our social media channels using the hashtag #BETownHall. At Black Enterprise, we present content offerings to enhance your business and financial lives. However, to further our advancement on all fronts, we must act now. Be on the lookout for our upcoming live event, the Black Enterprise Disruptor Summit, hosted by Nationwide at Southern Exchange Atlanta from May 17th to 18th. For more information on our future events and town hall sessions, go to blackenterprise.com/events. Thank you for joining us. Enjoy your evening.